So now when it comes to internships, do you think that unpaid internships should still exist in the world?
I don't think so.
Ooh.
Absolutely not.
No.
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 Illegal.
Abort mission.
Internships can be both an opportunity and an obstacle. So on this week's episode of Job Search Stories, we're going to discuss both sides of the same coin so that you can determine how this system may or may not work for you.
I'm Jen, a career coach and your go-to gal for all things career advice.
And I'm Priya. We've got your back as you take on the wild ride of job hunting.
Welcome to Job Search Stories.
Today, we brought in an expert to walk us through it all. Please welcome Maddie Herring. Maddie is a senior career coach at the College of Natural Sciences at University of Texas at Austin, as well as the school's internship course coordinator. With a background in mental health counseling and a Master of Education from the University of Houston, she specializes in helping students navigate the emotional and practical realities of launching a career. Welcome to the podcast, Maddie.
Hello. Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start with a pretty simple question. What is an internship and what are the requirements to get one?
So this is such a good question. And I think this is something that my students also often ask me because I don't know if they can really separate sometimes the difference between a job versus an internship or versus a part-time job or like any type of experience. If we want to go with the exact NACE definition, NACE defines an internship as a form of experiential learning that integrates knowledge and theory in the classroom with practical application and skills development in a professional workplace setting. And that was a mouthful, right? And that sounds like a lot more than I think it needs to be. But honestly, I think it's just extremely misleading. I honestly think an internship is just like an intro, kind of like an introduction, a skill building, a foot in the door to any industry that you kind of want to work in. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Internship. This is a whole thing of these two older gentlemen literally pivoting into a new career and they start an internship. I have a lot of seniors as well that come and ask me. They just graduated. They're like, I don't know what I want to do. And I was like, oh, did you try maybe an internship here? And they're like, well, I graduated. Well, that doesn't mean you can't still get an internship. I think there's a lot of common misconceptions about internships.
That's a good point. So internships you can have throughout your college experience, but also it sounds like post-college as well.
I think even at my age, if I wanted to pivot into a new industry, right, I could definitely get an internship somewhere and get that, foundational knowledge, start to connect, start to network, start to really learn and kind of build the skills in that new field. So it's honestly, internships are for anyone.
So I have an internship class I'm taking next week. Pretty stressed out about it, to be honest. I have to do school and work at my job, and then I have to get an internship. It's a lot on my plate right now.
Okay, so how many hours is this internship requiring?
I'm supposed to do, I think, 15 a week, and then I work 20 hours at my job currently.
Wow. Okay, so you're a full-time student, you're also working a full-time job, and you also now have to do 15 hours at an internship.
Yeah, I'm pretty stressed out all the time.
So, Maddie, internships are often framed as a career prerequisite, but the reality is that not every student can afford to work for free. And as the student just told us, he's pretty maxed out. So how often do you see finances becoming the deciding factor in who can accept internship opportunities?
I very much resonate with this student as well. This was also my situation. I had to work a bartending job almost full time, as well as do an unpaid internship at the same time doing my clinical mental health counseling program. So it's extremely stressful. And oftentimes, again, it is a huge sacrifice, right? So I do see this with a lot of our students coming in. But I do want to say the University of Texas's stance on this is that we don't post unpaid internships unless it's a government or agency or nonprofit, because we are trying to move as a university. And I know there's plenty of other universities that are doing this towards paid internships, because students do deserve to get paid for the jobs that they're doing, the work that they're doing. And there's just unfortunately a lot of populations that are still behind. So pre-health students, so you're thinking about those pre-med things, having to go and do shadowing and volunteering a lot of your time there. Unfortunately, those are unpaid opportunities. Some departments like human development, family sciences, psychology, they still have a lot of practicum courses that are unpaid as well. And research. A lot of funding for research has been cut. So there are a lot of unpaid research opportunities. And we don't want that to be a barrier for students to get those experiences. But again, we still want them to be paid.
It is really tough. I will say on Indeed, we only post paid internships to help students out with that, because you made a lot of good points around how difficult it is already to be a student and then take on this extra work when you're not getting paid and may need a job as well. Maddie, what's something a student should take into consideration before accepting an internship?
So thinking about some of our tech students that we have, and they have a variety of different options and different routes to go. They can do smaller, like little startup companies, or they can go to some of like the really big companies like Amazon. Something that I always encourage them to consider would be location too. Are you wanting to stay local, get one of these startups, stay with family, or are we wanting to kind of travel to the Bay Area or experience somewhere new? I had a student that was working at Amazon and they got an opportunity and it was fantastic, great pay, everything looked great on paper. It didn't set in how far they would be from their family until they were actually away from them. Didn't know anybody in this new town, right? I think that that's something that really doesn't sit with students often until they're like in that position. So thinking about where you're going to be located and getting that experience. And then kind of like going back to that big versus small, thinking about, those small, intimate startups and stuff, you're building really good connections. You're getting really good networking opportunities. You're able to chit chat with bosses and other interns on the regular, whereas maybe some of these bigger companies, that's not entirely feasible, or that's not something that you can maybe like do as much. And networking is obviously like such a big part of this. So sometimes, that might be a consideration that I encourage either students or people like new to a field to take. Something else would be like remote work versus hybrid work versus in person. I like a good balance personally. I like to have my alone time, but sometimes I do want to chit chat all day, right? I am a yapper. And I think this is something that students don't, think about, right? And so they're like, oh yeah, remote work is great. I don't have to leave the house. And then they sit there like, I'm lonely, So just thinking about what maybe actually works for you. And we think about like some of our neurodivergent populations as well, or they prefer that type of structure. Or maybe sometimes too much background noise is a little distracting for them. And so maybe they need a more private setting. So really thinking about what works best for you. So I always encourage like a student to just sit down and really think with themselves for a bit and like meet themselves where they're at in this moment and be realistic about some of their preferences and things like that. Another thing would be considering the professional development opportunities that these places have. Are these companies able to send you to additional trainings? Is that something that they incorporate in their internship setting? Thinking about, too, again, those networking pieces. You never know who you're going to work with. And then are you able to be in the same spheres as other people? What does your day-to-day look like? Are you going to be able to chat with people from, different departments and stuff and make those connections? Finally, and this is like the biggest piece I tell students to really investigate, make sure that the company that you're interning with has good return offer percentages. That is such a key thing. And especially if that's something that the company's bragging about, they're wanting you to return. They're wanting that return on their own investment. I had a student that was debating between two different companies, a small startup, which they liked, they felt kind of comfortable with, and Capital One, which is obviously like way bigger environment too. And because the startup just didn't have a good foundation, they were kind of like getting their feet on the ground. They didn't have the best internship conversion rate to like full-time jobs, whereas Capital One probably posted an 80% return rate. And so eventually they decided to go with Capital One as well because of that job security. When you think about the tech market that's going on right now, that security does sound very good. And that's something that I know a lot of students really like base their decisions on as well.
A return offer percentage is how often an intern is offered a full-time job. Is that correct?
Yes. There's different ways that they present this information. So obviously like really pay attention to how the company is conveying this to you. So if you think about the bigger companies, they hire like a whole cohort of interns. So of that cohort, how many of those interns got return offers? So thinking about it that way, or they might do it as an overall percentage conversion rate. And that could be just what they've offered or what interns have accepted and they've actually transferred. So paying attention to the language is important there, but oftentimes it's going to be that cohort format to where, okay, this is how many students were in this cohort, this is how many got these return offers, and this is how many actually like returned to the company.
So is that a question they would ask on an interview? How would they obtain that type of information?
You can ask during the interview process, kind of like at the very end, whenever they're like, do you have any questions for us? Yes, you do have questions. Please ask. But a lot of times this information is available on the websites as well too. So this is going to be something that companies typically for their intern programs, they'll actually like set up, especially some of the bigger ones. They're proud of this. this. So this is something that you can see up front. And then a lot of the times too, during the interview process, this is something that the managers or HR, they'll actually offer this information, especially too. So I always say that's a green flag for me whenever a company or position is already talking about, this is the offer that we're getting now. We're already interviewing you for this position, but also thinking about the future, we're interested in you returning and we're interested in you coming back.
If this episode resonated with you, we'd love if you followed Job Search Stories, rated us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and shared this with someone navigating their career journey. Thanks for joining us today, Maddie, and we'll see you all next episode.